going to talk about the fact that I'm 68 years old. It's because I want to set the mood for my story. I was born in 1944, went to Catholic school starting at 1949. And I stayed there until I was almost 14. And so I had a lot of guilt and shame because I like to masturbate, and I couldn't stop. The guilt and shame didn't stop me. I went to confession a lot because I masturbated a lot. And when I was a kid growing up, my mother was this beautiful woman. She's since passed away. But she didn't trust that she was pretty. She always had to make sure that she wouldn't even let me open the door if somebody was knocking on the door until she had makeup on. And this is just to give you an idea of when you see this as a kid, you grow up and you think, oh God, there's something, I better do the same thing too. So I was insecure in terms of how I felt I looked, that I had to be always conscious of that. I also didn't know how to dress very well because I wore uniforms. I love uniforms. In fact, this is kind of a uniform. I buy multiples of things, you know, the same color, and wear the jeans, and all the things have a uniform feel about them. So when I was, my mother was into setting my hair, curling my hair, giving me permanence. My first perm was when I was 18 months old, which is kind of scary when you think about it. You know, my hair wasn't okay. So when I was 13, I cut all my hair off. I had about a little pixie, and this was in 1958. And girls were using Coke cans to make their hair, these big bouffant hairdos. But I started high school with hair similar to what it is right now, except that I covered my ears because she always said, cover those ears, they're a little too big. All right, I get to high school. I've rebelled. I didn't even know I was rebelling when I chopped my hair off. I just thought, this is for me and I'm going to do it. And when I went to high school, I started having sex when I was 14. And I don't advocate it, but it was fantastic. I met a wonderful 17-year-old, and I had no idea we were having statutory rape was happening because I was perfectly into it. And so was he. We were discovering each other. Okay, that was a good experience, and he thought I was wonderful, and that was the first time I felt really affirmed that, gee, I'm okay, this man likes me. I'm heterosexual. I've explored a little bi, but basically I'm heterosexual. So then I decided after high school, I wanted to be a flight attendant. Well, I never wound up doing that because I went into Boston and I met my first husband, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen was a tall, about 6'2", burly. I thought he was Irish, but he's Jewish. Blonde hair, blue eyes. You know, I had a stereotype of what Jews look like. And I fell in love with him. He was extremely sexual. And he's the first person that ever said to me, Cheryl, how can you feel guilty about something that feels this good? And how can you believe in a God that would be less compassionate than you are? That made a lot of sense to me. So we had a fantastic time together. We had 2 kids by the time I was 23. And by the time I was 24, I had converted to Judaism, and we moved to Berkeley. We packed the kids in a Volkswagen van. It was so stereotypical, but we weren't very much stereotyped from where we came from in Boston and having grown up in Salem. We get to Berkeley just after the Summer of Love, but we have a blast. All sorts of wonderful things are happening. Unbeknownst to me, he's starting to feel like he needs more in his life, and so he tells me he wants an open marriage. We do open our marriage. It scared the hell out of me. But, you know, I was still thinking to myself, will anybody want me? I didn't know what the fuck I was thinking because, you know, in the 60s, if he said to me, you can go out there and just look at a guy and say, listen, I have a husband and 2 kids. I'm really not interested in anything but having sex. And who's going to say no? And he was right. He, on the other hand, was having a hard time saying, I'm married, I have 2 kids, and, you know, I just want to fuck. You know, so it took him a little while to find people. That was okay with me at the time. So meanwhile, I've had 2 kids, and I always had issues about whether I looked good, my body was okay. My brother and I used to look at Playboy magazines when we were kids, and I thought, that's what I'm going to grow up to look like. Well, I didn't. My breasts never stood up nice and perky like they are right now. When I was a kid, they sort of hung, and I thought, oh, God. And my mother never walked around naked in our house, and I did when my kids were small, not on purpose, but I just never made a big issue out of running and hiding my body. So my daughter had a chance to see what her mother was, what she looks like, and and when my mother was dying, I saw her naked for the first time. And I looked at her and I said, Jesus, Mom, you and I have the same breasts. It was so exciting. I'm so sorry it happened as she was dying. So I didn't want that to happen in my family. So I married, Mr. Cohen and I are in an open relationship. I'm having this experience with exploring my sexuality for the first time, learning how to say no, discovered San Francisco Sex Information. I was in their second training and became a member of the training staff, explored with many different people, and then discovered that there was such a thing as surrogate partner therapy. And what that is when a therapist finds a client or has a client who's opening up and discovering that they can really be, that's what they're there for, to tell everything. And they talk about their sexuality, and they may have a concern about how they're functioning, and they're not partnered, or their partner says, hey, you, get fixed, I don't want to deal with this anymore, which is sad. Because it works much better if they're not working with me and they're working with their partner. But if that happens, then I am trained to deal with their issues, starting with teaching them how to relax, teaching them how to communicate better, teaching them how to touch and be touched and receive touch, and then teaching them more about how to take it slow and easy when they're making love. It's not about wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's about taking time, noticing what your body's doing, the signals your body's giving. And once you can get to that place, you can experience your sexuality from a more beautiful, relaxed, loving, intimate place. So that's what I do for work. How lucky can I be? Right? I know. Hey, it's not all fun and games, but it is wonderful to see this process unfold and see people realize who they are and become more comfortable in their own sexuality, not try to be like anybody else. So in the meantime, I have discovered surrogate work, and in 1993, right at this time when I'm enjoying myself, I'm loving what I'm doing, I wind up with lymphoma. And I survived, obviously. But I had beautiful hair at that point. When I got to California, I had shorter hair than most of the guys, so I let my hair grow, and I had this beautiful, long, silky hair, and I had to shave it off. I did not want to have it fall off. So I wound up shaving my head. Having to deal with that was a little strange because, I had a lot invested in that hair, but I let go of it. I like being alive more than having the hair. Came back to work with short hair, let it grow out to about here, and, I learned to adjust. Then in 2006, I got breast cancer, and I had to have a mastectomy, and this is my new little breast. That was 7 years ago this month. So I had to go back to work because I really didn't want to retire, but I had to come up with a whole new dialogue. I do a thing called the mirror exercise in the third session, where I stand up in front of a full-length mirror with my client sort of reclining on the bed, relaxing, watching me. It's going to be his turn next, so I always go first, just kind of role model what I'd like him to do. And I had to figure out what I was going to say. And also, I didn't know whether to talk about this in the living room or before we go into the bedroom in the first session. I didn't know what to do then. And I talked to these two therapists who ran the support group that I was in, and this male therapist said to me, I think if you talk about it in the living room, that's all your client's going to be thinking about. He's going to be wondering, oh my God, what is this going to look like? And it's not going to be about him anymore, it's going to be about you. And that's not what this process is all about. It's really focusing on them. And so I didn't tell them in the living room, and the first client and I go into the bedroom, and he's about 6'2", and his issue was that he had had his penis enlarged. And in doing the enlargement of his penis, they had pumped in fat from either side, and it was lumpy and strange. I don't recommend penis enlargement, really. So I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be interesting. He's undressing, and he's not looking at me, but I can see him from the side. And then he turned around, and he looked at me, and I said, oh, by the way, I had a mastectomy in April, and this is my new breast. And he looked at it, and I said, would you like to touch it? And he said, yeah. So I squeezed this side, and I said, no, you have to touch this side. So he squeezed this side, and he said to me, this side is softer. I said, yeah, they haven't perfected these yet. Okay, enough about me, lie down. So that was so liberating at that moment, because he said, okay, and he didn't make any issue. I didn't make an issue. So that worked out perfectly. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the next time I saw a client, I had a prosthesis that fit over my silicone implant. This was too small, and now I have another one. But the prosthesis was silicone, and it stuck to my breast because it made me sweat. And with it came an artificial nipple, because I didn't have a nipple anymore. And so I could slap it on, and it would stick on, and I'd, take it off when I was starting to work. And one afternoon, I was working with this little man. He was about 5'3", from India. And he liked to cross-dress. So he was in a little cheerleader outfit with no pants on underneath. He's got a little short skirt. I like people to explore what their fantasies are. I think that's perfectly wonderful, and I create a safe environment for that. So he's crawling around on my living room floor, and I look at him as he's coming towards me, and I have no clothes on. I'm sitting in the chair, and he's coming towards me, and I see this growth on his knee, what looks like a big wart. And the minute I look at it, and I think for a second, oh Christ, he's got a wart on his knee. I've never noticed that before. I realize that it's my nipple. Yeah. And so I look at him, and I said, okay, hold on for just a second. So I reach down, I peel it off his knee, and I slap it onto my chest. And he says to me, what is that? But as I'm slapping it on, he's saying, what is that? I said, oh, it's just my nipple. Isn't it amazing the things that they can make nowadays to make your breast look better? So he and I had this wonderful session, and that was it. But the reason, what happened because of this, I'm telling you this because I have come from a person who worried about how she looked, do I might go okay, I couldn't leave the house without having somebody check me over, to a person who can deal with the scars that I've come up with, the illnesses that have come into my body that are now gone, thank God. And I feel at the age of 68 like I'm more comfortable in the body that I own than I've ever been in my whole life. And what I hope for all of you is that you can get to that place by the time you're 68 and enjoy yourself as much as I am. Thank you.